Introduction. The area that became Chicago caught the eye of European settlers as far back as the 17th century, when the French explorers Marquette and Joliet found that the waterways in the area connected the Mississippi River to the Great Lakes. The area became an outpost for the fur trade long before it was settled, and Fort Dearborn was built there in 1803. Throughout the 19th century, American settlers pushing across the western frontier came into contact with diverse American tribes, producing a series of conflicts ranging from the Great Plains to the Southwest, from the Trail of Tears to the Pacific Northwest. Indian leaders like Geronimo became feared and dreaded men in America, and Sitting Bull's victory over George Custer's 7th Cavalry at Little Bighorn was one of the nation's most traumatic military endeavors. The ongoing fighting between white settlers, militias, army units, and Native Americans not only bled into the War of 1812, but was one of the main causes of it. Many Americans chafed at the fact that along the northwestern frontier, the British and Canada were supporting Indian resistance to American settlement. So-called war hawks from that region in Congress pushed for a declaration of war, and many hoped that a war would not only stop Indian depredations, but evict the British from Canada and lead to completion of some unfinished business from the American Revolution, namely Canada joining the U.S. Although there had been treaties and seemingly cordial trading between the Native Americans and the new settlers in that area, recent fighting in nearby areas like the Battle of Tippecanoe less than a year earlier kept all sides on edge, and the British aimed to maintain a barrier between America and Canada by propping up Native American tribes, led to a controversial battle in the Illinois Territory at Fort Dearborn, a fort built along the Chicago River shortly after the War of 1812 broke out. When the war came, the close proximity of British forces compelled American military officers in the area to attempt to evacuate the garrison at Fort Dearborn. But misunderstandings and a lack of time resulted in Potawatomi warriors ambushing the soldiers and several civilians before they could retreat back to Fort Wayne, Indiana. In the wake of cutting down dozens of whites, the Potawatomi laid waste to Fort Dearborn itself, and though the fighting was technically a battle, in America the Battle of Fort Dearborn was known colloquially as the Fort Dearborn Massacre. Thus, even as the conflict was relatively minor in scale, it had far-reaching implications. Although Americans wouldn't be able to rebuild the fort until after the war ended, the memory of what occurred there increased the hostility towards Native Americans and helped ensure policies of removing the area's natives were popular among settlers. The most noteworthy result was the way in which events there culminated in the Treaty of Chicago, which would allow the creation of one of America's biggest cities and the westward movement of the region's native inhabitants. Though it started as a 300-person settlement in 1832, Chicago's location near the Great Lakes and its access to the Mississippi River turned it into a major trading city overnight. The city became even more important when railroads were constructed to connect the country, making it the first major city in the West during the mid-19th century. By 1871, the original 300-person settlement was now home to about 300,000 people, and Chicago had become the first major city built by Americans rather than European colonial powers. Thus, it had taken less than 40 years for the new settlement of 300 to become a city of nearly 300,000, but it only took 2 days in 1871 for much of it to be destroyed. On the night of October 8, 1871, a blaze in the southwestern section of Chicago began to burn out of control. The popular legend is that a cow in Mrs. Catherine O'Leary's barn had kicked over a lantern and started a fire. The story blaming the cow was a colorful fabrication, but the fire itself was very real, lasting almost 2 whole days and devouring several square miles of the city. The fire was so powerful that firefighters could not put it out, due to dry conditions, stiff winds, and the fact the city was mostly made of wood.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.